Well, welcome. I'm Sally Monastery, and I'm president of Scripps Fine Arts Foundation. And it's wonderful to see you at our first program of our 25-26 program here. We're very pleased to be the guests of the Claremont Lewis Museum of Art today. Before we begin, our October 14th meeting will be at the Williamson Gallery at Scripps College. And the people that researched Alfredo Ramos Martinez, the designer and artist of the mural in Margaret Fowler Garden, have discovered new information about Ramos Martinez's work. And so we will have a presentation in the Williamson Gallery entitled, it's a long title, Urban Labor and Alfredo Ramos Martinez 1932 Mural Sketches. And so that should be exciting. And then there'll be an opportunity to go over to Margaret Fowler Garden and actually see the mural on the wall there. And right now, I would like to introduce our board member, Karl Benjamin, who is here today. And we're grateful for her generosity in being here and for her father's 100th anniversary that's inspired all these wonderful viewings all over Claremont. So Beth, welcome.
It's wonderful to see everybody. This is my first board meeting back after being off for a couple years. So yes. It's very exciting. So I get to introduce David. Excuse me if I read. David Pagel is an art critic, curator, and professor of art theory and history at Claremont Graduate University here in Claremont, California, where he has taught since 1994. In addition to his teaching roles, Pagel is known as an art critic and art curator in circles much bigger than CGU's own. His reviews and essays have appeared in the LA Times, Brooklyn Rail, Art Forum, Art Issues, Flash Art, Art in America, and many other recent publications, too numerous to list. He is currently working on a book on Brett Price, which I believe actually has just been published. He has organized more than 90 exhibitions in the United States, Europe, and Australia. Pagel earned a BA in Modern Thought and Literature with honors and distinction in the humanities from Stanford in 1985, and an MA in Fine Arts from Harvard in 1987. He was awarded an Andrew W. Mellon Fellowship in Contemporary Arts Criticism in 1990, a McGeorge Fellowship at the University of Melbourne in 2002, and a 1,000 People Program Fellowship in Tianjin, China in 2018. A self-taught diorama builder and an avid cyclist, Pagel is a 7-time winner of the California Triple Crown, which you can look up. It's hard to imagine doing. It's hard for me to make a more personal introduction to David because I wasn't around Claremont much, though I knew he was a very important friend of Karl's for many years, even before David started teaching here. I knew David wore the brightest clothes of anyone in town. I knew he loved his family, he loved his bike, I knew he loved my father. Karl would often send me clippings of his columns that he respected very much. Way back in 2004, in a piece for the LA Times, reviewing the work of a young artist, David Ryan, David referred to him as drawing knowingly on Karl Benjamin's kinky tertiary colors. We love that phrase.
I'm so glad you found that.
Because I left town after high school in 1967 and started my independent adult life almost immediately and didn't move back here until 2010, I skipped so much of both my parents' careers, and indeed Claremont art and university history. I am envious of the people who knew him as a person, teacher, painter, and not just his child. I would have loved to sit with him and hear more about how he did his work and what was he thinking, instead of just basking and being surrounded by beautiful color and hanging out in the studio with him. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about all this today from David Pagel. But first, let me read you a poem I wrote about my dad a while back called Legacy of Being. My hand is shaking. I miss that luminous attention once I dwelt within, no longer mine, especially the smile that crinkled up your eyes and the steady quality of listening to my words and hearing all that was unsaid. You were my tribe, and now are gone. Yet I am still surrounded by the things you made, serene shapes of your concentration, whether smooth or jagged. These paintings live in my home, in magazines, and on the walls of my friends and fine museums. Regarding them, I sense you standing at your table by the easel, beside the brown Naugahyde stool, among the brushes and the metal paint tubes, amid a faint perfume of turpentine, my child imagination of a forest, pressing down the masking tape with your plastic guitar pick. I can hear the palette knife scooping and sliding on the pane of glass to blend the pigment with a golden pool of linseed oil, lifting and smearing the glistening mound of paint as you calmly seek perfection. You know what I mean, Catherine. Your gentle Father Harrison is no longer seated at his wheel, his palms centering the moist clay, creating exquisite curves, applying glaze and engobe, steady fingers carving sgraffito lines. But his pots live here with you. On concrete hearth and walnut table, reflecting his beam of attention. We feel their love and care, the yearning towards the materials and the timeless time in the studio. We are surrounded by their dreams made physical, manifestations of what they loved the most, as much as they loved us, his treasured daughters. We are fortunate whose fathers are artists. We have more than memories. Leaving us their work, we have them still. So now we get to hear from David Pagel.
That was nice. Thank you so much, Beth, for that intro and for your poem about Karl. That's, I think that's a tough act to follow. So, and I've never been even close to being outperformed by my introduction, but I'm worried about that now. But I love the connection that you talk about in your talk, and that kind of leads into mine. I want to first of all, now that Seth is out of the room, I can want to thank him for actually initiating the show at CGU that just came down in August that focused on 7 bodies of work that Karl made from 1970 to 1993. I wouldn't have done that show if Seth hadn't said, we're doing something here, Steve Comic was going to do something at the other museum, so we put it together real quickly, and then it was doubly meaningful to me because it's the last show we ever had in that building. We've since then the art department's moved out, so I'm really pleased that we could go out with a bang and of this show called "It's All About the Benjamins." But today I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 things: color. It starts with some thoughts about Karl's paintings, and one is color. And that comes through in the paintings hiding here, but you can see a little bit more. One of the things I love about color in Karl's work is that for me, it's beyond my capacity to describe it. If we look at these 2, I mean, it makes some lame attempt at the pumpkin brown, the butterscotch brown, and then my language just gets a gobbledygook of nothing. And that's one thing that's really important to me about Karl's work is that it doesn't fit into linguistic categories or ways we organize thoughts, and it really, to me, captures the richness of experience, of the myriad tints and tones of the leaves on, say, a tree, where you look at it in the sunshine and think my God, if I had to categorize those colors, I'd need 1,000 little buckets to put them in, and I can't possibly do that because I don't have the words for it, and I don't have the brain for it. And I love that Karl did that with paint, where for him, I think he was just an abstract artist from the get-go. Not because he was running away from the world. I think he was diving more deeply into the world and just getting at that just sheer, exquisite intensity of color. So to me, half of Karl is color, which comes through in these two. Again, the just like a range of colors that I can't come close to describing. And then the other side of Karl's work for me is structure. That it's like that the colors are apparent the second you look at them, but so is the structure. And the structure is pretty basic in terms of geometry, in that it's squares and triangles, and some other shapes too, odd polygons, but pretty basic geometric stuff. And I think that and that gets at the structure part, that it's rigorous and repetitive, but also really like clear and kind of obvious. And then my third thought after color and structure are the impact of these two things together. And to me, that kind of happens in a two-step process, where number one is Karl's paintings, at least for me anyway, overwhelm me with an abundance of just visual deliciousness. And then really quickly, my mind tries to make sense of that, or to take, my eyes can take it in, but I can't really know it. And then those two elements quickly produce a third for me, which I think of as the Benjamin bonus, where you continually look at a painting and bounce back and forth between the sheer physicality of those sumptuous colors and your mind trying to make sense of how he composed them or arranged them or put them together. And to me, it's almost this like ping pong or ricochet or back and forth or cat and mouse game between what your body is physically experiencing and your mind is making sense of it. And then these two things inform each other. And that's something I've found that's been true for me every single time I see a Karl Benjamin painting. Even after I organize a show and put them all up in the galleries, every day I'd walk in there and it would be fresh and new and something that I hadn't yet discovered. And over the years of looking at Karl's work, that's one of the things I take most from it, or I gain most from it, is that it's like, it's so now. And it does, not just because he was such a meticulous craftsman and made them so beautifully and so carefully and so perfectly, but because it's like, I can remember the intensity of the experience, and that memory is never as good as the live experience. So to me, it's really great live art. My talk this afternoon is going to come in 4 parts, so I thought I'd orient you, so you, if you started to drift off, you could hope for the next part. Each one's about 10 minutes long. The first one's going to be a walk through the show I just organized. Then I'm going to revisit the 3 reviews that I wrote about Karl's work, starting in 2004. And that's partly inspired by Beth, because she's been asking me for years if it was me who coined the phrase kinky tertiaries, or was it Christopher Knight? And I thought, like, well, I hope it was me. That's a great phrase. But I couldn't find it anywhere. So I went back and found these 3 reviews, hoping it would be there. And it wasn't. But I like that you found it in a review of someone else, where Karl got some glory, reflected glory from that. And then I'm going to I have a pretty good slew of works that I think provide great background for Karl's work. Not an explanation of it, but kind of like the backdrop or that his work stands out from. And then I'm going to look at the end at the structure of some paintings and just how complicated these things that Karl put together are. So part 1, the show, it was called It's All About the Benjamins, 1970 to 1993. It was at our old art building. This is a shot of the East Gallery. Thank you, Catherine McIntosh, for sending me these images so I would have them for my talk. I think she shot them with her cell phone, but they're pretty good. And right away when Seth nudged me towards doing the show, my first thought was like, I want to show everything. And I thought, well, that's not possible. That's going to be a mess. Karl has loads and loads and loads of bodies of work, also kind of individual works or one-offs. But I wanted to really look at his life as a serial painter, as someone who works in series. It used to be something more artists did. It isn't something artists really do much anymore. And by a series is really different to me from a body of work. To me, a body of work happens after it's done, where like an artist is like thinking through or working through or working out a bunch of concerns they're interested in. And then when they kind of resolve those, that body of work wraps up organically and they begin a new body of work. And to me, that's really different from a serial painter or a painter who works in series like Karl did, where he would determine ahead of time the size of the canvas, the structure of the composition, and the palette he would use. And then each piece in that series would be some kind of variation or permutation upon that set format. And it would have there'd be a clear start and a clear finish, X number of works, whether it's 10 or 20 or 30. And then once the artist finished that, they would stop. Karl would then like make up a new set of rules and move on from there, doing something different. Never ever repeating himself from series to series. Also never repeating himself within the series, but experimenting how a small set number of elements would interact to produce different effects. So in the back wall of the East Gallery are works, 3 pieces from 1970, and that one body of work. And then on the left wall, there's those 3 in close-up, kind of close-up. The only works in this show, these are from 1970, where Karl used green. After that, he stopped using green, I think because for him, it was a little too much like nature, or too much like grass and trees, and he wanted to have his work be a little bit further removed from any kind of associations like that. And I think, again, that he wanted to remove those immediate associations, not to make something distant, abstract, and cool, or objective and cold and detached, but to intensify the presence of the painting as its own thing and nothing else. Here's a painting of Catherine McIntosh's mom, who enjoyed the show quite a bit, I think, and I have it included here, because I think that Karl's works are all about pleasure, and they're about enjoyment and satisfaction. And to me, it's weird that you have to actually make a case for pleasure in the art world, maybe less so now than years ago when I was coming up, where when I started in looking at art was meant, or we were told art was meant to be critical and to be analytical and to be that kind of thing. And I always thought, like, well, that's part of the world, but that's not everything. And what I love about Karl's stuff is that it's like just kind of like sheer unabashed delight and joy in color. Another group of works, these are on the left of those guys are on the front, and then those are on the left side. And there's some close-ups of them. And again, just like determining a fairly simple structure and then assigning colors to parts of that structure, and then rotating, flipping, and mirroring those sections to make up the overall pattern. So on the third, and what I wanted to do in the show was have it be pretty much chronological, where you would start at the earliest work and move through one gallery, and to the latest work in that gallery, to go to the next gallery, and continue that movement. I couldn't completely do that because I really wanted in the second gallery to have the 6 cloud paintings on the back wall. So for me, it was most important to have the spaces look good, and I knew I wanted the 3 big ones on this wall to anchor that space, and then they're flanked by 3 other bodies of work around them, kind of going chronologically. And then this space, the Peggy Phelps Gallery, I really wanted the 6 pieces to be on one wall. I don't know completely if Karl would have been excited to see his work hung one on top of the other, but I liked it, And I actually think, and I think it worked, and I would never do something as a curator that I thought the artist wouldn't like. So I actually think that when Karl saw, if Karl can look down and visit it, he'd be actually happy to see it that way. The response I got were really, really positive. Someone said, like, oh, this is awesome. This is just like a museum show. And then they said, oh, it's actually not like a museum show. No museum would be nutty enough to do this and put all these Karls in one place. And so I took that as a big compliment. So the 3 anchoring one gallery, the 6 anchoring the other one. Me hanging out with the ladies at the show. Same Benjamin attire, fancier pants today. But it's like, and it's not just a self-involved picture. I really think that Karl's work is social, and that it's perfectly happy to be something that's there on the wall that you, the viewer, can stand and look at and enjoy and get a lot out of solo. But it's also then really happy to say, like, I'm just going to be the background, and I want to be an enhancement of the conversations that go on around me. And I think that that's a really interesting way to think about works of art. I think there is a branch of art where it's like, come look at me and do nothing else because I am the whole universe. To me, I think that's abstract expressionist painting. A lot of New York painting is like that. A lot of conceptual work is like that. But I think Karl's is like, I'm going to stand here and provide you with more visual stimulation and intellectual stimulation than you can get anywhere else, and that's going to be great. But you don't have to do that all the time. You can also take a step back and chat with your friends about what's here. Yeah, I picked up the 26 paintings that were in the show from the storage facility at Pomona and loaded up a U-Haul and drove them across campuses. And they looked beautiful in the storage. They looked even okay in the U-Haul. They looked great carrying them out of storage when the sun was on them directly, just vibrant. And then they looked cool in the gallery. But when we finally got them all up on the walls, it was really, really fun because there were a handful of students there over the summer that came in and were just like, wow, this looks great. And it felt like that to me. And I've organized loads and loads of shows, but getting Karl's paintings all together like that was really, really special. And this is the very last one in the show, among the last paintings that Karl made. And to me, it was kind of the exclamation point on the show because it was so different from everything else. And I think it's, and one of it is just in terms of the structure, because it's kind of like the least structured, at least geometrically. And I can name a polygon, a pentagon, a heptagon. I have no idea what these shapes would be called, almost like scraps of fabric. But there's still rules that Karl is working by on these paintings. And this one, no 2 colors are the same. So it's like one color gets used once, and in almost everything else, the colors get repeated. But as the work goes on, there are often fewer colors and more complex shapes. So that's one thing I wanted to do in the show, is lay out examples from 7 series of works so viewers could come in, survey it chronologically, and then think for themselves about what is this person doing over these 23 years in his work. And it's like, it's not rocket science. You can actually say, oh, he did this in this one, and then from that he did this, and from that he did this. And to me, that's one of the most exciting things to do as a curator and as a visitor. And as a curator, I think of myself as just a lucky visitor who gets to spend more time with the stuff. But I want the argument that the show makes is to be made through the work and not to fit into some trendy or otherwise philosophical category. Yeah, so these are then I had. I actually didn't know how many reviews I had written of Karl's work, but I went in my cellar and dug through my files and found 3 of them. The first from 2004, and then from 2011, and then from 2014. And I would, I just want to read them. I hope that that's not too long, but they're not quite as good as poems. This was, and I actually remember, when I covered shows for the LA Times, I would go out sometimes on a bi-weekly basis, sometimes on a monthly basis, and sometimes on a weekly basis, and look at like 50 shows and decide which 4 or 5 I wanted to write about. And I just loved that heading out at the beginning of the day, not knowing what I was going to do. And well, I knew I was going to look at art, but I didn't know which ones I would write about. And I would always choose the shows that, for me, were the most interesting to sit down and spend a couple days writing about. So super selfish, super subjective. My goal was to produce a good piece of writing by talking about the work. And there's very few shows that I actually remember clearly walking in and seeing. And this one in 2004 at at Louis Stern, I remember so clearly walking in and seeing it and actually just kind of having my mind blown. And here's what I said back 21 years ago. Karl Benjamin enjoyed a moment in the spotlight in 1959 when critic Jules Langster coined the term hard edge to describe his paintings along with those of Lorcer Feidelson, Frederick Hammersley, and John McLaughlin, which he included in a legendary exhibition at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art titled For Abstract Classicists. Langster was right on the money with his hard edge definition, but how he came up with the idea of classicism is anyone's guess. Benjamin's paintings are fruitier than nutcakes, so chock-a-block with wonky colors and eccentric shapes that it's hard to imagine anyone linking them to the balance, rationality, and restraint typically inspired by the ancients. At Louis Stern Fine Arts, a smart selection of 20 paintings from 1954 to 1964 shows Benjamin to be an American original. Today, his works look as fresh as the moment they were made. Recently cleaned and newly varnished, their impeccably painted surfaces look as if they're still wet. Although the LA artist is not as well known as he deserves to be, his reputation is on the upswing, especially among color-loving painters appreciative of an artist who not only spent his 50-year career marching to the beat of his own drum, but often switched tempos in mid-stride. Still, he managed to make everything in his best paintings look too good to be true. The exhibition is arranged coloristically, not chronologically. Red, white, and blue dominate the first gallery, but delicious bubblegum pinks, fiery orange accents, lavish lipstick tints, and resplendent shades of burgundy turned Benjamin's reds into something of a rainbow coalition. A slew of fine-tuned pastel blues diversifies this slice of the spectrum. Off-balance white stripes and bars appear to expand or contract, depending upon their temperatures and those of the colors that snugly abut them, like jigsaw puzzle pieces. Patriotism is playfully evoked, as are jazzy valentines, Martian sunsets, TV sets, autumn leaves, and the folding screens behind which starlets used to undress. The second gallery features green, lime, forest, and olive, accented by a big rectangle of plum and an even bigger circle of eggplant. Compositionally, these are Benjamin's most stable paintings, ranging from syncopated checkerboards that make your eyes buzz to a mismatched diptych of concentric rectangles that makes Joseph Albers look like a dutiful schoolboy. The final gallery includes the earliest work, Red Sun, Blue Moon, 1954, one of the most recent, VH, 1963, and 5 intervening pieces. Together, they allow viewers to see the spiraling course of Benjamin's development, from symbolic landscapes to interlocked cubist-derived planes, and from rhythmic vertical stripes to fractured grids and fragmented systems. Intuition plays an increasingly potent role throughout the decade. As Benjamin's compositions grew more emphatic, his colors turned more saturated and his paint handling becomes more sensual. As a rule, he sets up systems just to discombobulate them. Apart from the lovingly brushed surfaces, the edges of each shape are razor sharp. But what's most remarkable are the colors and the aplomb with which Benjamin juxtaposes their weird tertiary colors in combinations that make no sense intellectually, but are indescribably beautiful. With an eye on design and a deep love of the unexpected, his eccentric paintings provide a treasure trove of pleasure for anyone interested in visual magic. So, no. Can't look at it. Let's see if there's. Oh, so yeah, that was the days when the newspaper printed color reproductions of art reviews really, really big. And that was is that big enough to read? No. No. I can. No, so that was the first one. This is the next one. 7 years later, and I wrote, over the last 8 years, Karl Benjamin has had 4 solo shows in Los Angeles, 2 museum surveys in Southern California, and 2 out-of-town exhibitions. His paintings have also been included in 36 group shows. That's a busy schedule. It's all the more remarkable because Benjamin has not made a painting since 1996, when the physical demands of his exacting abstractions exceeded his body's capacity to meet them. Even more impressive than the number of Benjamin's exhibitions are the range and power of the paintings in them. At Louis Stern Fine Arts, Karl Benjamin and the Evolution of Abstraction, 1950 to 1980, is exemplary. Filled with canvases never before exhibited and others you can't get enough of, the sensational show traces a path through the 85-year-old's oeuvre that is eye-opening, even to viewers who follow his work closely. Part of that is due to Benjamin's work ethic. For decades, he painted with purposefulness that bordered on recklessness, eagerly embarking on new bodies of work immediately upon completing old ones, which he squirreled away in a storeroom. Over the years, that storeroom became a treasure trove, which Benjamin's recent paintings dig into. In the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, Benjamin exhibited less frequently. Sales were rare. Living in Claremont, he fell into a way of working that was self-sustaining. Rather than relying on feedback from others, he made sets of works that carried on conversations among themselves and between and among other sets. Always lively, sometimes feisty, and often eloquent, these conversations looped back to earlier compositions, formats, and palettes, only to break away from what such setups had delivered. This is evident in Benjamin's 6 stunning paintings from 1975, where diagonals and right angles join forces to transform otherwise vulgar color combinations into weirdly sophisticated instances of just the right stuff. Logic and intuition intermingle in these rigorously beautiful works, whose pleasures are sensible and mind-blowing. Color and structure are Benjamin's bread and butter. His talent, or genius, is to put them together so deliciously that you have to see them for yourselves, and once is not enough. And the final one is from 2014, and it's the shortest one. Karl Benjamin, The Late Paintings, is all about discovery. Fun figures into the sharply focused show, as do delight, surprise, and wonder. At Louis Stern Fine Arts, the first exhibition of Benjamin's works since he died 2 years ago at 86 shows a lover of color at the height of his powers, slamming together slender, neon-tinted triangles with weird wedges of cinnamon brown, bruised maroon, and delicate gray to make paintings with madcap palettes that sound gross but look great. Vision, not logic, mattered to Benjamin, and his 12 late paintings bring his purposeful wackiness to viewers so generously and deliciously and joyously that you can't help but feel as if this show is a gift. It's set up perfectly. The 5 paintings in the first gallery, painted from 1986 to 1989, show Benjamin balancing color and structure, sometimes packing supersaturated slabs and slices into jigsaw compositions, and at others laying out asymmetrical wedges of color as if each were a panel of a folding screen or the flexible folds of an accordion. Composition takes a back seat to color in the 3 paintings in the middle gallery, all from 1994. Each is a grid, a 5x5 arrangement of equally sized rectangles of some of the strangest colors Benjamin ever cooked up. Benjamin stopped painting in 1995 because his health was falling, and because he had satisfied his desire to come up with compositions that would make color sing. That's what happens in 4 paintings in the last gallery, where a lifetime of looking carefully, thinking clearly, and then letting color rip pays off in spades. You can look at these electrifying paintings forever and always see something different. So that's my poem version of my homage to Karl. Thanks. No, it's so fun to revisit those and have you pay attention to them, because as a newspaper writer, I'd get totally into it, crank them out, send them in, see them in print, and then the next day, gone. And you almost never, ever hear anything. So it's good to dig them out of the morgue. And this is the third part of my, I'm kind of on schedule, talk is kind of the context for Karl's work. Naturally, it's going to start with the 4 and the 4 abstract classicists. I think McLaughlin is swimming in the same sea as Karl was at that time, John McLaughlin. And I love about McLaughlin is he sets up something that looks like it should be a pattern and then kind of bends it or twists it or tweaks it. So to me, he flirts with symmetry only kind of to pull the rug out from under symmetry. So to me, there's a really careful balance between a structure and it's kind of not working out perfectly, or like and to me, it's doing something repetitively that doesn't get boring. So it's messing with the regularity. Hammersley is the next one. One of the things I enjoyed most about hanging out with Karl was his competitiveness with Hammersley. They started out making work that looked a lot alike, and then both went, to me, pretty significantly different ways. But Karl was always really aware of what Fred was up to and respected it deeply, but wanted to be a little bit better. And it was to me, it was a really kind of healthy competitiveness. It wasn't the nasty competitiveness that I know from other parts of my life, but it was a real admiration and challenge, I think, that went on in between Fred and Karl. And I think that one of the main differences, I think that Hammersley zeroed in on a single unit, and then in your mind you could create that, make that become a pattern. And Karl was, to me, a lot more complex than that, and would repeat units within a composition, and then those units would build upon that, if that makes, so to me, this would be a small chunk of a painting that Karl made. And so to me, Fred is more of a painter of a singular thing, and Karl is a painter of sets of things. But those sets didn't interact with each other just by repeating. To me, they kind of did the McLaughlin thing of twist and turn and mutate. And I'll get to that later. Fred also cared way more about poetic titles and wordplay. Karl's pretty much number 12, 1972. Really, it's the visuals that matter, not the words. And I think there is there may be more of a little bit of a narrative thrust to Hammersley, and Karl was allergic to that. This is just a little remember that? Doesn't that seem like it was 7,000 years ago? But I think they ripped off Hammersley. Lorser Feidelson, another artist in the 4 abstract classicists. Again, single fields of color that interrupted by bends and twists. Much more, to me, graphic than Karl's painting. I think design played a larger role in Lorser's work. And I do almost always feel like there's a little trace of representation of depicting the world in these, maybe the way a sail on a ship blows, or the rope on a flagpole blows. There's those associations, and to me, those kind of things are totally absent from Fred or John or Karl. Helen Lundeberg, another one who should have been in the 4 abstract classicists, but wasn't. And for her, I think that the tie to the representational world is a lot tighter. I always feel like I am looking at, like when I say Karl's cloud paintings, it's like that's only like a way of talking about them. They don't make me really think of clouds, where I think Helen's kind of do, or especially even like Blue View. I think of like, looking out the window, maybe in Greece, or a place where there's a whitewashed brick walls. And I'd like to expand that California group to include Lee Mulliken. I think that they're both interested in like focus, centrality, and energy radiating out from that. Also like just the blazing glory of color. I think this is Robert Irwin wishing he were Karl Benjamin. Not a thing that he's not that known for, but this is, to me, it's like, okay, you've been looking at composition in a way that I don't think any or many of Irwin's earlier works. I think when he started doing those colored light ones, he started to think more like a painter and more compositionally, and then it had more to do with Karl, and I like that kind of change. I mean, I think Irwin's an amazing, amazing artist, but it's like, to me, his reputation is what it should be. He's like world renowned, and it is. And people talk often when they talk about Karl or the 4 abstract classes, like it says, oh, that's a variation of light and space. So it kind of comes out of light and space. But I like to look at it the other way and like, well, light and space is eating off Karl's plate too. John Miller, he went to Claremont Graduate University. Oh, that's a terrible slide. They're super. That's a much better slide. Wow, that one dug neat. On raw canvas, to me, he captured the structure side of Karl, not being all that interested in the color side of Karl, but the rigor of the structure and the overall impact, I think, are pretty important. Ron Nagel, a ceramic artist, I think that compositionally, he paints in a way that Karl did, only he was painting on 3-dimensional things. And I do think of them as like individual units that could get repeated, so more maybe like Hammersley, but like that wraparound color, I think that Karl did a lot of that, especially in some of the ones that I showed from my show where they get the zigzag patterns where it's almost impossible to tell where one unit begins and the next one ends. And to me, that's one of the really brilliant things of Karl's work, that he started with those simple squares or triangles, and then got to a place where you can figure it out what a single unit is, but the units look more interlinked than juxtaposed, more overlapped than laid out. And I think that Nagel is someone who does that. And also just the concern for color, texture, surface, and the sensuality of the stuff. The physicality of it really, really matters. Yeah, if Karl were a ceramicist, he'd make stuff like that. Clay porn. I also want to put like the heavy New Yorkers in there, because I think that Karl always gets talked about in the context of California, as if that's a separate planet from New York. And here I want to just like, hey, this stuff is going on in New York, and the stuff going on here in California knows it and is talking about it and is interacting with it and doing something maybe more interesting than that. But that's a super famous Barnett Newman painting that's gigantic, it's almost 20 feet long. But that kind of becoming an all-embracing, immersive experience with these moments of division or rupture or focus. And I think like Karl can do that in 5 by 5 feet. And Ellsworth Kelly, some of my favorite Kellys for just how weird they are. To me, it's like, why would a painter make a painting that half is on the floor and half on the wall? And I think Kelly was doing it because he was really, really interested in like it being both a visual experience and a physical experience. Is that slide really woozy, or that's just because the screen is moving? Yeah, it's like, woo. Another Ellsworth Kelly, echoing some of Karl's grids, much more random, much less structure. That's like fill in the paint by number structure. I think Sol LeWitt needs to be talked about or Karl needs to be talked about in terms of Sol LeWitt in the form of structure and variation, or format and content, or format and experience. I think this is a particularly apt one. A more recent worker after Karl is Jim Iserman. Also, I think wonderful in like taking a structure and then warping it or tweaking it or bending it or twisting it to amp up the power of the structure. One of the happiest moments in my life as a curator was when I organized a group show in the galleries that had Karl in it and Jim Iserman in it. And they had never ever met. And they came to the opening, and it was like watching two Martians meet after being separated by planets forever, because they absolutely spoke the same language, and it was a language I didn't understand at all, and they would just like glance at each other's work and talk about the relationship between the parts and the whole in a way that was just like someone who's really, really sophisticated at speaking French, as I'm going like, oui? And it was so neat to see that there was like this visual language that they just both inhabited.
Where was that one?
That's the Dallas Cowboys Stadium. And that's a monster piece. So it's 40 by 96 feet. It's Jim is like Karl Untitled. And then he tells you what it's made of. Yeah, when the Cowboys built their stadium, it used to be AT&T Stadium. Or wait, maybe it is they might have had an ownership name. They built an art collection into the stadium. So when it opened, they had tons and tons of big works. And I was lucky enough to be asked to write the wall labels for the works in the Cowboys collection. And my snobby friends were like, oh, why would you want to talk to football fans? And I said, why wouldn't I? And to me, it's like, I mean, how many people read the wall labels? Well, a lot of people read wall labels. How many more people are at a Cowboys game than are at the Museum of Contemporary Art? And I also thought, like, well, and I want to, these people have really good things to do. They have football to watch and hot dogs to eat. So you better write a wall label that can capture their attention on the way to the men's room between quarters. So it was a job I loved. This is a more recent installation by Jim Iserman. And I think it's like Karl lives on in that, maybe in a way that is over the top and clashing. But it's wall, yeah. Yeah, that should get your get the motion sickness going. So it's vinyl wall labels upon which he hung his paintings over a bunch of different series. Dion Johnson, here in the audience, happy this one's here. I think that Dion's looked a lot at Karl. Dion's also looked a lot at color and shape, and to me he's working with the same ingredients that Karl is, color and structure, and doing some kind of voodoo or witchcraft to make both of those things do way more than 1 plus 1. And also the sensuality of the colors and the way that Dion treats paint, to me, is the way Karl treats paint. It's like this thing that's almost like revered as a rare and precious entity that can do stuff. So you don't mistreat it, you make it sing. Patrick Wilson, another CGU grad. Dion was a CGU student. This one's in the collection of the other museum in town. Patrick piles, again, it's basically he paints rectangles. And he's been painting rectangles for about 25 years, and I'm still not bored by what he does with rectangles. And again, it's like he treats, he puts everything on with a palette knife, like Karl, or a big squeegee trowel shovel-y thing. There's never a brush involved, and it's taped off like Karl's, and Patrick really piles stuff up in a way for me that it's all rectangles, so it should all be orderly. But he does this so many that I completely get lost, and and I'm kind of OCD sometimes, and I like to say, well, how many rectangles are in this painting? And I'll start counting them. And it's really, really hard to tell what's there, and because some get covered up. There's just a whisper at at the edge. Okay, now the nutty part of the lecture. Is that one right across the? No. So this is a piece from 1969, which is the year before the ones in the show that I just organized happened. And I wanted to look at it in terms of how Karl put it together. So this is a really, really bad slide because I just scanned it and then I did my marker on it. But I divided the piece into 4 quadrants and did this puzzle game. So you take the one in the upper left and flip it over and set it down here and you'll have this quadrant. Do you guys follow that? So the far, oh, this is where I need my pointer. I can't get that. But yeah, so the upper left square is repeated down here. And then the quadrant 2 gets to quadrant 3. And so to me, this is the really exciting thing about Karl's work, especially compared to New York abstraction or pattern work or serial work, is that he does set up a structure, but that structure interacts internally with itself in a way that it rearranges itself with itself in different ways. So to me, it's like, when is a painting more than one painting? To me, it's when it's a Karl Benjamin painting. So to me, it is a single pattern, but it's more complicated than that. So to me, the minimalist serial artist would do like plunk, 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 and Karl does plunk, spin, plunk, and then plunk, spin, plunk. So he complicates things. And then even more, now this gets really wacky. So he starts with 10 colors, I think, and I tried to name them, but it's kind of purple, 2 purples, 2 reds, 2 blues, 2 yellows, and 2 oranges. And this is still the same painting. So we're doing the quadrant flipping and plopping, but also when he goes by rows, no, yeah, so the top row of the 12 squares just get repeated. Did you get it? Yeah, so they're not flipped. But the one change that happens is that the dark yellow becomes a bright yellow when it crosses the y-axis. And then and the dark red becomes a light red. So these colors are changing, but only in those triangles as you go this way. So you get, it's a repetition, but a difference. Did you follow that one? And it's a pain in the butt to do with my crappy print it and draw on it, but in the flesh they pop a little bit more. So that's going on in that one. And then this is another painting. This is actually from the show, and the slide's really, really bad. This was the one furthest to the left on the back wall in the main space. So the 3 oldest paintings from 1970, this was on the far left. But you could, and now what goes on here? So the quadrants go, so they just match up. So see, quadrant 1 and quadrant 4 are exactly alike, right? Yeah, and then 2 and 3 are also like. No, he didn't lift and spin and plop. He just overlaid. So to me, there's bilateral symmetry, there's kind of horizontal symmetry, there's mirroring, and in all of Karl's paintings, he does different moves like that by just inviting you to rearrange the painting howsoever you can follow it. But this one is way more complicated than that other one that just changed the leading triangles where they went from like darker to light. Here, can you follow so see that when he goes from that row to that row, the very first square darkens as it crosses the y-axis. The second one darkens. The 5th and the 6th lighten. And the 2 middle, each of the triangles behaves differently. You with me? No. Do you? No, yeah. So you see, so just look at the top row of the 12 squares. And the first one has a red triangle cutting into a yellow space. And then that gets repeated just to the right of the y-axis, but it's darker.
And they're actually the same size.
Yeah, my Sharpie killed part of Yeah, I didn't want to draw on the painting itself, so I just did it on my, yeah. And at first I did with a little thin Sharpie, like, I can't see that. So yeah, so they're exactly the same size. That's just let's see if it goes. So maybe that's easier to see. So see how the bright yellow one, it gets darkened? So as it crosses, so to me, it's like daylight or dawn and daytime and dusk. And so the first two squares darken as they cross that axis. The last two squares lighten as they cross that axis. So you see, so the far right one, if you go back there, it's darker. And within the two middle ones, some of the triangles darken and some of the triangles lighten. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of the complexity of Karl's paintings. But I find it really, really fun to look at something that I think is a whole and then break it down into parts and then see how those parts interact with different parts in different ways. And so to me, Karl's doing this with color and with structure. And using, the structure isn't there just to make a place for the color, and the color isn't there without the structure, but they interact in a really complicated way. Oh, and this is still the same painting. Yeah, so this one, I probably should have had this slide before. I divided it into, how many parts? 12? And so do you see for the upper left one, when it comes over here, it's getting flipped? Oh, wait, this is a different, no, I'm right. Yeah, it's still the same painting. Oops. So that got flipped, but then so this one just gets like straight up repeated. This chunk, Karl just lifted this one up, set it over here, and painted it. Same with this one, he just lifted it up and set it over here. This one, he took it like this and then flipped it over. Do you see that? And it's, no, and it's like, and I love it because there's a method to the madness. They're both like extremely deliberately thought out and worked out and meticulously executed, and you can like unpack them forever. And I wanted to keep doing this one, but I ran out of dope and didn't get to it. But it's like the next time you're in front of a painting by Karl, just like start playing around. So to me, far upper left matches this guy. So there's bilateral symmetry going on. There's top and bottom symmetry going on. There's flipping and rotating, and it's magnificent and crazy. But I never ever have got to talk to anyone about that sort of thing, so I'm happy to have you here to listen to me go on about it. And I'm happy to answer. Happy to take any questions. I don't know if I'll have answers for them. No, not too much off time. Yeah.
I have a question. Seth told me about coming home and picking random numbers out. And he was placing the colors using rapid random.
He did that sometimes, but not in these guys. Yeah, but actually I don't know if maybe, I think he had the format, and then I think he would pick the random colors to fill out one unit, like one Hammersley painting, and then once those colors, that random array, then they would get, so yeah, in a unit in those, I don't know if he would do those colors rando or not, but they still add up. Here's a section, this sixth, and then there's another one, and you can play the same game with these guys. But one unit is just this square, which is. But these are where it gets really complicated because I think I feel like I'm looking through the V into that, but then looking through the circle into the into the V, and then when they hit the edges, all kinds of different stuff happens. But you can unpack these in a similar sort of way.
My sister did say that she used to get that he'd have little slips of paper that had 1 through 12, and she'd pull them out. She'd pull those slips out of the paper, and my idea was there was the whole big triangle ones, and there were rules like no two colors could go beside each other, and because he wanted those series to be totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I do know those were like that, but I don't think the ones that I'm cutting apart or chopping off are Karl's a complicated painter, and I think that a lot of the complexity of work gets overlooked by New Yorkers because it's so brightly colored. And they, oh, it's pretty, and then they just don't have to think about it. But it's like, to me, it's pretty and it's really smart too. Yeah.
I have a question for Des. Some of them look abstract, but some look like native patterns from certain cultures. Could you address that?
I
Did
think
you
that
have
that's
collections
very
at your
true.
house?
But I do not, I mean, he had a lot of African sculpture in his house, and all his influences were in there. But I don't think he ever tried to make it. So, like, there's one in there that looks kind of surfboardy. It's the third, it's not those two.
So those three were on one wall,
What did
and
you
then
call
this is.
those? Big A or something?
On the sticker it said Big A paintings, but talking to me when I would hang out with Karl, we would almost never talk art. We would just talk other stuff. But he said he would register how much he hated work that was supposed to do the job of politics, and he would get so much grief in the late 70s and 80s and into the 90s, where like your work's got to be political or it's meaningless. And Karl got just indignant. So, okay, these are my VC paintings. These are about the North Vietnamese. What do you think now? And I was like, whoa, I don't know. But he was like, screw you. And for him, it was absurd to think that you couldn't relate to color and shape in an immediate and physical and human way, and you had to filter that through the struggle in Vietnam. But he was just indignant. He was just like, it's like yeah, take your.
Then there was 3 Mile Island ones.
Which ones? yeah. But they do. I mean, to me, they do. Like in my image bank of memories, I have Navajo patterns stored somewhere there, and these are I would store them in my same. But I would say that it wasn't Karl looking at Navajo patterns and being inspired by it. To me, it's the Navajo weavers and Karl Benjamin looking at the world and rearranging it in a way that's really visually arresting, and then talking, then to me the works talk to each other. But to me it's not, Karl's certainly not a historian and not an anthropologist. He was a painter and a pattern maker. And I think the Navajo people are pattern makers, but I think that they mean really different things. They function really, really differently. But to me they're in the soup of humanity. That's this.
Is there a catalog recently?
Yep.
Oh, there is.
It's
Talk to the boss.
If you go to Louis Stern Fine Arts, whatever it is, there'll be a catalog resume. It's basically all put together. They haven't printed it out.
Whoa.
But and I think what you said, put in your name and then they approve you. And then you get a password or something. But you only have to do that once. I don't know why that is. Maybe that was just maybe that was just at the beginning. I don't think they check your background.
it's like Karl would love that. Like, no, you don't get to see it. You're a twit. Yeah.
But yeah, and it's wonderful because of course, chronological they are, and you can see all the stuff. Oh, thank you. Well, it's only online.
It's digital, so it's only this thing. But it's truckloads of images. It must be phenomenal. Yeah, go to Louis Stern. And actually, when I went and looked, it did say catalog resonate. I didn't click on that tab, but that'd be super valuable. But it's like a chance here. They're so great to see in the flesh. Because preparing for this, I've been looking at them. We've been online, and I walk in here, and it's like, wow, they're way better than.
Has anybody tried to recreate these in fabric?
Didn't Louis Vuitton do that?
No, it was,
Come to see. What else?
I've always wanted to make some clothes, but
Yeah.
never have, probably never will. But there's a really fancy upscale clothing designer, Karl Benjamin, and at one point they licensed a few of these paintings and made shirts.
I wish I had one.
They only made them for skinny people. It was really sad.
I'll lose weight.
So some of them were like, none of those paintings, but they existed for a very short while. But they do that with licensed artists, and then they have a thing, and then they move on to the next thing. They were pretty cool.
They're probably more expensive than the paintings.
The vertical line ones back up.
Which one?
Now,
Oh.
I didn't get a chance to see those very well.
Ooh.
Is it just that one?
There's three.
There's so
There it is. There.
actually, so that wall had 4 of those.
Oh my.
And then around on the next wall that had the door on it, there were 2 smaller diamondy ones that were related to those guys. And yeah, to me, it's like the structure gets about as simple as it can, but the color, and I think of these as the way the color looks different depending on who its friends are, and it just gets so much cooking. And to me, that's why I wanted to do a serial show rather than like show one of these and one of another one and one of those, but to actually let these 4 talk to each other in the space, because I think you understand it more deeply when you see what's going on between the ones in the series. And to me, it's like the structure is so simple, it's almost stupid, but they're so rich.
Yeah, the colors are so.
Yeah, and
There's
so that's
one field color, right? And
Yeah,
then-
yeah.
then-
So this would be 4 colors. So the orange field, blue stripes running the whole length, and then green and yellow or orange divided. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, and then to me it's really fun to look at what's going on within one and then to look what's going on between them. And where are the cloud guys? I go. Is that better?
You wouldn't know it was the same pattern.
Yeah, and I love that some of these, like the little, the triangles around them, some they just like pop out as the most present thing, and other ones they just disappear. And the colors are super weird. Yeah, so in the very beginning, the colors are pretty simple with like primaries and secondaries, and then they get totally twistoed. I see. Yeah, that's awesome.
Thanks to the Fine Arts Foundation and anybody else who's here. Welcome to the Claremont Lewis Museum of Art. So I was just going to talk about our current show, so you have a little bit of info about that. My name is Seth Pagel. I'm the interim director here, and I curated this exhibition. We were very excited to celebrate what we're calling Benjamania, which is the 100th birthday of Karl. There are several exhibitions going on. So we had the show at CGU. Louis Stern is having an exhibition. The Chafee Community Museum of Art and Claremont Heritage are all doing things. So it was really cool for me personally to have the show happen at CGU, which was a partner exhibition to this show. Because it kind of bookended my experience with Karl. My first exposure to his work was the exhibition that David curated in 2006 that he referenced that had Jim Isserman. And I got to hang 2 of Karl's paintings for that show when I was my first semester at CGU. So I wanted to just touch on briefly how this show ties into some Southern California art history through the lens of color and abstraction. So I think what's kind of hard to imagine now is just how radical Karl's work was, and the other, we are featuring 2 other hard edge painters, June Harwood and Florence Arnold. If you look at like the 1950s, what a break the hard edge painting was from abstract expressionism, which was all the rage. And also what was happening in Claremont. Karl was studying with Gene Ames and Millard Sheets in the early 50s. and he ended up making work that looks like this. So it's a pretty, you know, you could just tell he had this vision of what he was interested in. So we have works by Cherry O'Shea in the exhibition also. He's from the light and space movement, which kind of came out of Hard Edge. And he won the LACMA Young Talent Award in the late 60s. And his work, you know, it's abstraction, it's color, it's form, but he also has kind of a sense of humor in pieces like the crystal ball in the middle gallery here that, you know, kind of references the artist as seer kind of thing, kind of tongue-in-cheek. And then we also have works by Rachel Lakowicz, who's the current chair of the art department at CGU. And if you haven't noticed, some of the wall labels in the exhibition, she makes work out of cosmetic materials, makeup. There's a lipstick painting. This one's made out of eyeshadow. So she brings in this feminist lens, the seeing abstraction through the complexities of politics and gender. So yeah, really excited to celebrate Karl and then also kind of put his work in this wider context that is current today through Rachel's work and other artists influenced. So yeah, thanks for being here.